I'm pretty sure that some of the features I will show you today will be here even before the version 18. So the idea of streaming is not really to render everything at once, but instead to turn this into a stream and push pieces of the HTML as we render them on the server side. What happens next? So let's say this BCD is still there, not hydrated, and some event occurs sometime later, for example, like leak. And in reaction to that event, we would like to make this subtree interactive. The next thing will be zoneless change detection. And at this point, things are getting interesting again. Hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. Matt, thanks for the warm welcome. And yeah, let me start my presentation with a quick question. And the question is, who has already upgraded Angular version to the 17 in the project? Please raise your hands. Okay. I see like quite many. It's not that bad, like 17% probably. And for the rest, you can consider this your homework for today evening. But yeah, maybe you are asking yourself a question right now. It's not even a month since Angular 17 got released. And are we really going to like hear about the new versions at this point? So what's the point in that and so on? So let me explain a little bit. So you might have already noticed that recently Angular is approaching a feature shipping process with more incremental way. So that means that they ship something, then they try it, they just give it to the developers, and then they build upon that further and further in the future versions. So this has really many ingredients. So one of which is like RFCs, when they are gathering developers' feedback, then RFC summaries. We have some features that are marked like experimental, the other ones are like developer preview features, and so on, so on. And just pretty much the tip of the iceberg, because basically in the background, there is so much more happening. And this includes working with the GDEs, also gathering the feedback from companies both outside of the Google and projects inside Google and things like that. So this is quite really complex process. And then at the very end, the stabilization comes in. So this incremental process results in the feature shipping being more mature. And we can, at the very end, we can all benefit from that because the features itself better fit the framework and also better fit the developer needs. But this has also like a bunch of other implications, and two of which I would like to mention. So because they are really important for our presentation. One is what is happening today really shapes the future of the framework. So that's one thing, and that's what I think this topic deserves our attention. And then the other thing, so with this whole complex process of shipping features, it's much harder to predict when a specific feature will be shipped or stabilized. And it's not only us, like the regular developers wondering about this, it's also GDEs and even the Angular team. So they are not really so eager to commit to any specific version when the feature will be released or stabilized. So with that being said, if you expect me today to do some magic and maybe tell you the exact set of features that will land in V18, that's not going to happen, unfortunately. But some of the features can arrive in V18, some of them maybe 18.2, some of them 19 or later, or maybe even never, as this is still a little bit speculative. But the good news is also like, I'm pretty sure that some of the features I will show you today will be here even before the version 18. So yeah, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Krzysztof Skorupka. I'm working as a team leader at House of Angular, also as a senior dev, sometimes architects, and so on. And I'm, of course, also a community member of our great Angular love. So let's get to the first topic, one of the hottest. from the recent versions of the Angular, and also when it comes to the future. So I divided each topic into two sections, two parts, one of which is what we already have, just to quickly iterate through them and ensure that we are on the same page, we understand each other, and so on. And then we'll get to the part when we are looking into really the future and see what we can expect. Okay, so SSR, what do we have? So we have basic SSR support. It used to be served by the Angular Universal, and it's there for years. But the fun fact about this one is it was not like this was since the very beginning of the framework. Initially, this started as a community initiative, but it was like pretty soon integrated into the framework itself. And then recently, Angular Universal got retired, kinda, and the code was moved more close to the framework itself, to the Angular CLI core, and also a new package, Angular SSR, was created. So yeah, that's the state for the 17. And also we have some cool feature, which is non-destructive hydration. We got this in version 16. And this includes both provide client hydration, which just enables this feature itself, and also ngskip hydration that allows us to opt out of this non-destructive hydration for some parts in our application. And I would like to jump into this topic for a second because we'll need it in a couple of minutes. So let's start with the destructive hydration. So first, if we would like to really talk about the hydration at all, we need to have our application that needs to be server rendered. So you can see we have a piece of code running on the server. It's typically Node.js based, Express server, when we have like an engine based on Angular that is capable of rendering our page there. And then imagine a request hits in our server. So our app gets rendered entirely on the server. We are fetching the data, getting everything, doing all of the calculations. And once the whole thing is ready, we are snapshotting this to the string and then pushing through the network the HTML as an HTML response to the browser. And as a result, we get the web page, which gets rendered on the page. There is a DOM tree, but the important thing about this is that this page is still static, so no interaction at all. It just looks like it looks. So what happens next? Sometimes somewhere in the meantime, JS is being downloaded, and Angular starts working. And then a terrible thing happens because what Angular does is it destroys whatever was previously rendered on the server, and only then starts the whole thing from the scratch. So that's not really what we like, because this results in the application flickering between this transition, and things were not really so good. But luckily, in V16, we got the non-destructive hydration. So initial part is the same. We get the HTML from the server, we render it, there is a static page, then Angular kicks in, but this time Angular is smart enough to reuse whatever was already provided for it from the server. So the DOM is not destroyed, Angular just runs and reapplies all of the event handlers and so on on the already existing DOM. So we see the immediate benefit that it's not only not flickering, but it's also faster. Yeah, so that's non-destructive hydration, and it was released, as I said, in V16 and stabilized in V17. And also we have this ngskip hydration. So let's say for some reason, maybe our C component is not compatible with this non-destructive hydration. So we can mark it with this ngskip hydration attribute, and it will get destroyed and rendered from the scratch. So pretty much like destructive hydration, but really targeted to a specific place. Okay, so that's it. And then the next thing we have in scope of SSR is unified application builder, client and server. So things used to be like we had two separate builders, one for the client and one for the server. And basically, some of the operations, if we were building both, were just executed twice. So that's not the best approach. So with this one, everything is unified, and some of the code is deduplicated, and the operations are deduplicated. But I would not like to get into so much details here because we'll also be talking about the builders in a while. So let's leave it for now. And also we got some SSR improvements for the edge workers. And this includes ECMAScript module support, as well as fetch-based HTTP client and other things. So regarding this one, to be honest, things are still not really far from perfect, but at least we have some basic support for the runners like Cloudflare, for example. Okay, so then what we can expect from the SSR in the future. So first thing is streaming. So if you remember, a couple of seconds ago, I was talking about how the Angular is run on the server. So it just what it does, it renders the whole application, waits until it's stable, and then pushes this to the browser, basically. But so the idea of streaming is not really to render everything at once, but instead to turn this into a stream and push pieces of the HTML as we render them on the server side. So this technically is not really so difficult, but the hard part is to know exactly when each component is done. And by this, I mean when we are rendering these components, maybe we will take them and push them too soon. So we need to be really certain that they are done rendering, and only then we can push them to this pipe and transfer them to the browser, so the browser can already take advantage of this and start rendering our page. So yeah, we have a couple of approaches here. Maybe it could be totally automatic, maybe it could be totally manual, like the component will raise something that, okay, I'm done, you can push me, and I can be used already on the client side to be rendered, or maybe something in between. So Angular team is validating all of these approaches right now, and yeah, so they are. I think we can expect something pretty soon, at least when it comes to some experiments being publicly available. Okay, and then the second thing is fine-grained hydration. So let's get to another example. So again, the same thing that we had previously. This is our SSR server, and it generates HTML. We have a static web page as a result, but let's say this time we decide that we really don't need a part of our application to be interactive from the very beginning. So let's say like this whole BCD subtree can be left not hydrated, and we would like to hydrate the rest. Yeah. So Angular starts working, and as a result, we'll get something like that. And this is kind of nice. And what happens next? So let's say this BCD is still there, not hydrated, and some event occurs sometime later, for example, a click. Yeah. And in reaction to that event, we would like to make this subtree interactive. So that allows us to really control the hydration and say the framework help understand what parts do we need immediately to be immediately interactive from the very beginning, and which parts we can really postpone and hydrate later. But what if we take this approach even further? So not only to have a subtree which is not hydrated, but maybe we would like still to leave it like it is, and then when the event occurs, you need to only hydrate a single component, like C in this example. So this is even more fine-grained hydration, But this also presents a set of other challenges and trade-offs and so on. Because as you all know, Angular applications are hierarchical in its nature. Yeah, so it's built like, we can even see it from this tree. And there are even things like in HTML that are also hierarchical, like forms of styling, but also in Angular, like inputs or dependency injection. So what would happen if C really needs some provider that it's being some service, let's say, for example, that is provided in the B. If B is not hydrated, then C cannot really work without that. So this is really like quite hard to implement, and Angular team is also looking into this, but they are not really sure if the Angular developers and projects need this, because to implement this, it's, as I said, much harder than the previous one. And yeah, this approach can be called islands. I intentionally put this in like quotation marks because you can know this concept already from other frameworks like Astro, for example. So this is like kind of similar in terms of that we have a reactive island, which is C, surrounded by some static content. But in fact, like the Astro architecture and Angular architecture, all of the assumptions about the app are quite different. So that's not really the same thing, only these islands are common. Okay, so this fine-grained hydration results in smaller initial bundle size, right? Because we have just much less code to download initially. So yeah, it just will be faster. And then also improve time to interactive, because we not only have much less code to download, but also to execute, right? So then our application, the interactive part that we need immediately to be interactive, can be pretty much interactive much earlier. Okay, and regardless of the approach, if this is the subtrees or islands, or maybe we can go even further, but let's stick to that. There are some problems, opportunities that can be in fact turned into opportunities that needs to be solved in this space. So first of which is components boundaries. So some of the frameworks are not really having some clear boundaries between the components, but in Angular, we are pretty much covered when it comes to this, because we have the selectors that identify our components. But even if at some point they will get maybe removed, Angular already generates components IDs. So this is what is used for our style sheets. If you sometimes look into the source code, you can see like the components have these unique IDs that allow us to scope our styles only to that component. And it's also, in fact, used already in the hydration feature that we have right now. Then the other thing is reacting to state changes. So for example, we would like maybe to bring back this subtree to life if some underlying data changes. So how to do that? Yeah, so maybe signals are the way. And with that, we can maybe render our application on the server, then serialize our state graph, put it to the client, and then we already know, because we rendered it on the server, that B is, for example, using some particular signal. And if the value of the signal changes on the front end, then we know that, okay, it's time to rehydrate this B, or maybe the whole subtree, and bringing and make it reactive. And then we can react to this change and update the value on the view. And the last one, reacting to user events. So in our previous example, you notice this click event that really happened on the not hydrated part of the application. So you might be wondering, why is this possible? If it's not hydrated, not reactive, so how really we will react to this click? So the answer here can be event delegation. So this is the pattern that not really is focusing on some particular targets of the events, but instead it wraps all of them in a kind of a container and allows these events to bubble up and to be collected by this container. And at the same time, these targets and these actions are identified in some way. So they have, like, let's say, unique ID. And then we know, for example, in this container that some click happened for the B component, which is not hydrated yet. Okay, so we know that it's coming from the B, and then we can load the code for this subtree, make it interactive, and run the right handler, and just our application will work as if B was interactive since the very beginning. Okay, so then the next thing that we have for the SSR is defer improvements. So right now, if you look into the code of the defer in the Angular framework, you can notice this last line here, which checks which platform do we use. So if we use browser platform, then all of the sweetness that Fanny's just showed us will be executed. But if you are running this on the server, well, the server only will see the placeholder, or even nothing if the placeholder is not provided. So that's far from perfect, right? Because wouldn't it be nice if in the future version server also sees this component and can render it basically on the server side, then move the application to the client side, but leave maybe this thing not hydrated, right? Because otherwise you might be wondering why we don't have it right now, right? Why they did it only for the client but not for the server. Well, we just discussed that we don't have fine hydration yet, right? So we only can hydrate the whole application. So if we would render my component on the server, then transfer it to the client, we would have to render it also on the client, right? So that like really contradicts the whole point of defer on the front end, on the client, sorry. So then what we need here is on like the fine hydration mechanism, which will allow us to render this on the server, but leave it static and not like immediately hydrated on the browser. And in fact, it could be if the Angular teams decides to proceed with the approach with these subtrees, then this could be pretty much good fit to be a foundation for the whole feature. So if they will go with these islands, then things are getting complicated, and this probably will not be able to serve this purpose. But if they will go for the solution with just the subtrees, then yeah, this could be the right choice. You can see like these two fit pretty nicely together. Okay, and then the last thing here is SSR being enabled by default in version 18. So right now, if you are creating a new application in version 17, Angular is asking you if you would like to have server-side rendering, but the default is no. From version 18, the default will be yes. So it seems like a really tiny change, but it really shows the approach of Angular team to this SSR thing. So it's like being treated as a first-class citizen, basically. Okay, then the second hot topic is signals. So with signals, I would really not like to get into so much details here because there is already so many talks about this topic, so many blog posts and so on. You may be sick of it. So let's just quickly iterate through this and see what we have, and then we'll get to what we can expect. So we have the signal APIs and also toSignal, which are stable. And also we have effect and toObservable, which are still in developer preview. And like toObservable relies on effect under the hood, so that's why they're both staying in the developer preview. And that's because effect is more like tied to the component and change detection life cycles, timing maybe, and that's what makes it still being not stable, because the Angular team is still like trying with different approaches regarding this. Yeah, so basically it's still, things are still like that. And then also we got two new lifecycle hooks, but these two are no longer component lifecycle hooks. They are no longer tied to our component. They are more tied to the whole application. So we have after render that will be executed after each render that happens in the application, and also after next render that just executes once. But that's really important thing, that it's not only tied to this specific component when we use them. And yeah, and the most interesting thing I would say in signals is semi-local or G-local, like global local change detection. And let's look at this one for a sec. So all started with this pull request, and basically, maybe it's not really visible, but anyway, what I really telling us here is if you use on-push components together with signals in the templates, then you can kind of have local change detection that will be run only for this specific component. So sounds promising, right? So let's get into this. So let's say we have our component tree, and it looks like that. And then the code of the G component, it's very simple. We have a button, we have a title, which is tied to the signal, and in the F handler, we just update the value of this signal, right? So yeah, let's see what happens. The precondition, let's assume that the precondition is met. We have on push components pretty much everywhere. And then let's see. So let's pretend that this click occurs. So we click on the button that it's inside of the G component, but we can notice that our whole path starting from G up to A, so up to our root component, got marked as dirty. So maybe not really that what we've expected. And what will really happen just really quickly after that, they will all get change detected, right? So something looks wrong here. Yeah, so it was supposed to be like really local, but it's not, right? The whole path was marked, the whole path was change detected. So why is that? Well, that's because Zone.js is still running in this application, and we cannot really get rid of it at this point. And what Zone does for on-push components, if the event happens in the G component, it will mark all of them as was shown here, and then they will get change detection. So everything is according to framework rules. So let's try another approach. So this time, let's maybe put a button. We put like a variable on this button. Then we can attach an event handler directly to this button, but this time we will set this up outside of Angular, right? So we will be like clever. We will go outside the zone. Yeah. So let's see. An event occurs, and now things look a little bit different. Yeah. So we see like our G component was marked with refresh view flag, and A and E has child views to refresh. So far, so good. It seems everything is as we expect. We are done. Well, not so fast, because basically what would happen, that would be it. Nothing more will really be triggered. So because we are really running out of zone here, in this scenario, it really doesn't know that anything happened. So our components get marked, and the change detection was not run. So no benefit here, right? So how can we fix this? Well, we can try some dirty solution, like this one. So we can do upref tick in scope of our event handler and trigger change detection after the signal was set. But of course, this is not a good solution. Don't do that. First thing is that we don't really like to do this manually. That's not the point, right? We would like for this to be automatically run for us. And then the second thing is, if we would do this for pretty much every handler and every signal, it will result in really many change detection runs being scheduled. Yeah. So that's how things look right now. So even though we are technically, it is technically possible to run change detection just for a single component, in fact, it is not really useful at this point. Okay, so then signals, what to expect. So first, signal-based inputs. So basically, signals will no longer be marked with this. Inputs will no longer be marked with this input annotation. Instead, we'll use the functions, and also outputs syntax will be aligned with these inputs, just like they really look similar. And this will most probably be released in 17.2. So we can expect this pretty soon to be there. Then signal-based queries. Basically, our view children, content children, and so on will produce signals now, so we can react to the change of their values and make our applications more reactive with signals this way. Then the next thing, effect being stable. So as I said, it's not stable yet because it's really tied to all of these internal timings and mechanism in our app when it comes to the change detection and so on. But at some point, it will get stable, and maybe we can even expect more like effect-related functions with different timing, like maybe before render effect, after render effect, things like that. So this is still being considered. And then the next thing is reduced lifecycle hooks. So I've already mentioned this after render, after next render. So the hooks from the previous slide, they are already there. And also ng-on-init and ng-destroy will be kept. But the rest will be really removed because it can be replaced by combining the behavior of all of these mechanisms. Okay, and then the next thing will be zoneless change detection. And at this point, things are getting interesting again. So again, this started with this specific commit or draft PR by Alex, experimenting with zoneless change detection. So what we got there is he created a kind of a new change detection scheduler, which is no longer based on Zone.js. So let's bring it to our example. So in this case, we have our application. The code looks like the following without any dirty hacks and so on, just like we used to write our applications. And then the event occurs. Then the path is marked with the proper flags, so as previously, but also change detection is run only for this component. And what is happening behind the scenes, it's like all of the functions that I showed previously are being used, but also the change of the signal value is propagated to this scheduler. So it's able to collect all of these notifications and then schedule the change detection. In this example, it's just with request animation frame, but this could also change in the future. But anyway, this is like just an experiment, but it proves that this could work, and probably they will be built on top of that in the future. So this is like really nice, and this is really a big step towards, right? So we are going from the Zone.js-based change detection, which only really tells us that something might have changed. So we don't really know if anything changed, where it changed, who is using it. So pretty much nothing, to the version when we really know that something really changed, who's using it, and what needs to be changed at the very end. So this will have a huge impact on the performance of our applications. And also, I would like also to mention here one more thing, because you may be wondering, okay, I don't really care so much about the performance. I have like a back office application, which don't really need to be like so performant, so fast, and so on. But it's not only about the performance. It's also about the efficiency. So if the change detection is run only in this situation when it's really needed and it's really scoped to the single components, then it means that much less operations needs to be performed. So this also can affect things like the CPU usage, or on the mobile devices, battery usage at the very end, and so on. So for the most part, our application can stay idle instead of like overreacting like it was in case of Zone.js. Okay, and then finally, once all of this will get finalized, we'll get signal components and full signal-based change detection. So no longer this on-push like temporary solutions like I've just presented, but eventually it will just be based fully on signals with signal components and so on. And right now, what is implemented in the framework, it's per component change detection. So like the smallest unit that can be change detected is component. But also there is a great space for improvement here, because there is like a function which is called view should have reactive consumer. And this function has like just a single line. And if this line would be changed, we will just out of the box get per view change detection. And per view change detection can be performed for each embedded view which is in our template individually. So even like more granular than the per component. And then at the very end, some of you may like it, some of you not, but RxJS will become optional. So that was already stated by multiple Angular team members, and that would be the thing. But yeah, probably it will really take a while. Then the builder. What do we have? We have application builder, which combines both client and server. So right now, as I said previously, the operations are deduplicated. So the compilation, the optimization, and so on are run just once. And only as an end result, we will have two phases, let's say, of bundling, one for the client, one for the server. So it is much more performant. People like notice like 30%, 60%, or even I saw like some reports of being like a couple of times faster for the build. So it really depends on your case, but yeah, it really improves the things. So it is based on ESBuild as a bundler, and Vite is used as a dev server for our like local dev server when we are developing our application locally. And what we can expect here is to get a library builder, which will also get based on ESBuild, because right now it's still based on Webpack. So unlike the application builder, it's still like the Webpack thing. So eventually it will have to be also based on ESBuild. So the works on this already started. And then also pretty nice thing, which is improved HMR. So hot module replacement. So basically, you probably experience this really like thousands of times or like tens of times every day. And the thing is here, like if you are updating just the CSS file or the template, the whole Angular application in the browser is rendered. So if you are really deep down in some scenario in our application that we need to get through some, I don't know, wizard or maybe the dialog and so on, we'll lose it and we'll have to do the thing again. So with that, our application will be refreshed, but only the parts that were really changed. So the template or maybe the CSS. And probably we will not get too much improvements when it comes to the TypeScript, only these two, as I said, template and CSS, because this use case is like really more common when we are introducing some tiny changes, and it's also much easier to implement. But also some efforts already are in progress. And then also, this is like pretty cool thing, it's lazy type checking. So this is like an idea, like maybe when we are building on the dev server, so when developing our application, the app after our changes, then do we really need to have this type checking on a critical path? Because it takes time, right? And we would like to get the results immediately. So maybe the idea could be that we will transpile our application from TypeScript to JavaScript, but then this type checking will be happening separately and we'll eventually get the results. So like at the very end, it's about being more optimistic, that probably things will be really going good. Yeah, there will be no errors and so on. But eventually, the type checking output will also be delivered to the developer. But this should really also improve the dev server build times. And then again, the last thing here is Webpack support deprecation. This one probably will even take longer than making RxJS optional, but Angular team also stated that at some point that they would like to get rid of Webpack completely. Okay, so then let's just quickly iterate through the other stuff that we have here. So Angular DevTools, they are available for Chrome and Firefox as an extension, and they have this components injector when we can play with the components on our web page, with inputs, properties, and so on. The profiler when we can check our change detection runs, and DI debugging graph visualization. So this is pretty new thing that we got it in V17, and this pretty much allows us to get through our environment hierarchy as well as element hierarchy and visualize how our providers are structured when they are really provided and so on. So this is really helpful if you have some issues with this in your application. And then what we can expect being able to debug iframe applications, because right now we can only like debug the applications itself, not being like embedded in iframes, but only like the apps we have currently open in our browser. And then also something similar for the signals. I mean, something similar to this DI debugger. There will be also a graph that will visualize us how the reactive graph looks like. And this will be pretty helpful as we'll be working more and more with signals. And then also, this is like a more long-term plan, but probably we'll get something similar for the router to see how it's configured and maybe even suggest us what we can lazy load, what we are not using here, and so on. Okay, so what else can we expect? The first thing is component authoring format improvements. So yeah, the basic idea is right now we have these double imports of the components, first of which is just the JavaScript or TypeScript import, and then the other one is on Angular level. So maybe we don't need the one on Angular level and use this lexical scope of JS instead. Then maybe also the selectors will be not needed, yeah? And eventually, if we will using more and more standalone components, at some point they will just become a default. So then standalone true doesn't make sense anymore. And same from signals. And as a result, our component can look like this in the future. So yeah, as you see, it's much shorter. Some of you may like it, some of not. I would say it's a matter of preference, but for sure, when it comes to this, we can expect some RFCs around that and so on. But yeah, this is really interesting, but also presents some challenges. For example, if you think how to express the directives in this annotation. Okay, and then also we can expect that forms will be signalized. So they have like really many properties, not only the value of the forms, but like the status and so on. All of these can be expressed as just as signals, and it will be much easier than it is now, and still we can react to these changes. And again, this is really interesting one. Angular team mentioned that this could in fact be a good occasion to look into these two types of forms, let's say, like reactive forms and template-driven, because under the hood they share the same model, so maybe they could be unified in one model. So this could be like pretty big thing. Okay, and then we have Angular material. We can expect that all of the components and directives will get standalone. And basically, this is already implemented. This is merged. This is just waiting to be released. So probably 17.2. That's where we can expect this. Design tokens. So yeah, this is pretty much a good example because they were trying to really wrap this up for the version 17. But yeah, they failed. So you can see that's why probably they really don't want to commit to any specific version. And of course, design tokens bring material-free support. And at the very end, they also mentioned that they would like to have like a new design of the website, like really similar to what we have on the Angular.dev webpage. And speaking of which, Angular.dev is still getting more and more tutorials. It will be official documentation of the framework, probably in version 18. And also, it will get zoneless because this is the Angular application under the hood. So actually, Minko stated that as soon as it's possible, it will be zoneless. And that's it. And also, he said that we are kind of 6 months away, probably, from that target. So this indicates that we can see this in version 18. So maybe zoneless up in 18 sounds great. Yeah, so really, there is a lot of it, isn't it? So you might be asking yourself right now, do I really need this? Like, do I really need to know all of this right now? So yeah, the answer is probably it depends. But let me explain a little bit about this. I would like to provide you with some examples or some points of my reasoning, why I think it's really crucial for us to stay up to date, to look into these new things and so on. So first is equip yourself with a better tools. So basically, it's about finding the right tool for the job. So in fact, you can implement, let's take Defer as an example. In fact, you can implement pretty much everything what Defer delivers manually. But you need to take this effort, you need to implement this, test this, support this, and so on. So there is no point in that, right? So maybe if you have this out of the box, you should just make use of it. Of course, it could be like you don't have really immediate use cases for that to use it right away. But that's not an issue, right? Because they are waiting for you. Once you have a good case for that, you can just reach for them. And the other thing here is also like some of these concepts are really complex. For example, if you look at signals, their API looks really simple, yeah, at the first glance. But then the whole thing that they bring to the table, the whole concept, the whole concept about them, how they affect the framework, and so on, it's really huge, I would say. So if you don't look first with some smaller examples, maybe POC, side projects, and so on, but use it right away in your production application and just build some features on top of that, yeah, that could be a painful lesson. So then the next one is about avoiding hype-driven development. So this is kind of tricky and might seem counterintuitive, because if you know all of these new concepts, you might think like it's really tempting to use them right away, right? So that's one perspective, but I would like to look at this from a different angle. So let's say you don't know all of these features and so on, and then some teammate tells you, like Fanny's mentioned in his presentation, let's make everything, let's mark everything with defer. Yeah, right, yeah, let's do this. So if you don't really know this, how can you really like vote for something or against something, right? So it's really crucial to know your framework and your tools in general, not only the framework, to really make like conscious decisions that will really fit your needs. So yeah, I believe that really to avoid this hype-driven development, it's really crucial to first know what you are dealing with. Then the other one is keeping your products attractive. This is on a little bit different level in case if you are like CTO or maybe tech leader, or maybe you have any kind of an impact on the decisions in your company regarding the tech stack and so on. You know that developers are like quite demanding right now. They really would like to work with the cutting edge technologies, with the better stack and so on. So keeping your product attractive, up to date, both keeps your team motivated and also allows you to maybe catch and hire the most talented people that really would like to work in these newest technologies. And then the next one is more personal, on the other hand. So let's say you are in a case when you are working in really legacy code with a really old version of the framework. You've tried like a million times to like improve things and so on, but nothing really helps. No one listens to you. So at the very end, maybe you will have to change your job, yes, and look for another one. So if you stay up to date, if you look into these new features and so on, this gives you an advantage over the other candidates, right? It's much easier for you then to find the dream job, or at least to have more options just in case. And then the next one is to provide input feedback. And this is really important both for us and for the Angular team. They are really seeking for developers' input. They really like to hear you, to see your problems, what you would like to have in the framework, and so on. So that's really important. And they are often telling us, like, the more they work in the framework, the better they are working in the framework. But the more they lose the perspective of working with the framework. So like the end developer perspective. So that's why we should provide this to them in very like different forms. And why is it important to us? Well, at the very end, it's us who's using these features. So if you if you really are about to complain about some feature next time, let's think, what did I do to like provide my input, provide my feedback, and improve things? And almost the last item, because it's fun. So I believe this really doesn't require any further commentary on my side, because I believe we are all here because we really like Angular, like working with the newest stuff and so on. So yeah, give yourself some fun with that, and that can keep you motivated. And finally, if none of the above convince you, try to at least don't fall too far behind. So this applies both to your framework, your project. So please try to keep it up to date, maybe like 2 versions, like let's say right now we have the 17, so try at least to be on the 15 and so on. So maybe that's what you can allow at this moment. So I really get it that it's sometimes really hard to keep up, but believe me, if you fall too far behind, it will be much harder to catch up. So yeah. And in case, if that's your case, that you are already behind, you also don't have to worry because we have you covered. So with that said, I'm also really happy to announce our project when one of our contributors, Mateusz Dobrowolski, was working on this for a couple of months together with the other team members. And yeah, this is an ebook called The Ultimate Guide to Angular Evolution. So it just highlights all of the most important features, starting from the version 14 up to 17. And it's not only the technical overview, it also shows some challenges that this feature are aiming to solve and some benefits we get, and also a couple more things like some comments from the experts, from GDEs, and so on. So I really encourage you to follow our social media. This will be free. So follow our social media, subscribe to our newsletter, because this will be coming in January. So basically, that's it, what I had for you for today. So let my final take on this be, the framework is really evolving in front of our eyes, and I think it would be a great pity to miss the boat. Thank you.
So thank you, Chris, with this awesome journey to the Angular future. And right now, let's start with the questions. So maybe I will ask the questions from the chat first. So Jakub is asking whether it is possible to dynamically add remove directive rendered on inputs. For example, I would like to change directive place on the inputs in runtime by asset config. It's a tough question, I would say.
I'm not really sure if I get the question regarding the part of putting directive to an input, but if it is, I would assume that this is about putting dynamically the directive on the element. So as far as I know, this is not possible really right now. We need to have it statically on the element. Maybe in the future with all of this new stuff, with this new syntax and so on, but right now I don't believe that this is possible.
Okay. There is another one from Wojciech. Would you say that using signals instead of other ways to manage state is like building a future-proof app that will be ready to drop zones easily in the future?
I would say this is really a complex topic, but my take on this would be to use the signals as close to the template as we can. So for example, in components or state managements that are really close to this component. So maybe things like signal store, for example, and so on, because then we can really benefit from them when it comes to the change detection and so on. When it comes to managing the global state of the application, that's really the complex part. And it really depends on your use case. But I would say I would not immediately turn everything into signals, especially that also Angular team is working hard for us to provide this really great interoperability between RxJS, which most of the current state management solution is based on, with signals. So yeah, the short answer would be, in templates, I would use signals as much as I can, but when it comes to the other layers, this is not so obvious.
Okay, and so far that was the last question we got on the chat. If there will be future, I will just bring them on. So maybe there is some question on site.
You mentioned optional RxJS in terms of signals or in scope of signals. Are you aware of any changes to HTTP client which would make it truly optional?
I would repeat the question because we need to have it for the stream. So the question was if I'm aware of any changes regarding RxJS being optional when it comes to the HTTP client. So for now, I don't really know anything about that. And as I said previously, I think we are kind of a few versions away until this happens. So I believe first we would get like all of these signal inputs, queries, and so on, signal components, and maybe at the very end, or maybe there will be two versions of this HTTP client like supported at the same time. I don't know, but for now I don't really know anything about that, and I think nothing is already there.
Okay, thank you. There is a question on the chat. Dmitry asks, is Angular 17, whether Angular 17 has migration schematic for modules to standalone components?
Yes, it has. Or maybe it's not even 17. I guess it was even before.
Yeah, but right now they also introduced some kind of the schematic, for the version 17.
Yeah, so basically they try to introduce schematics for pretty much anything that they introduce right into the framework. So to really make this path of migration from one version to another really easy for the developers. Of course, that's so in 17, that's, for example, the case for this control flow. Yeah. So that's what we get.
Okay. So if there is no more questions, we can finish. So thank you, Chris, one more time.
Thank you.